It's a good number, Michael. Episode 44 of Project Kids.
I saw
It's
that.
been a long
And
time.
well, yes, it's been a long time. How are you, Emily?
I am, it's kind of, every day is a winding road, to quote Sheryl Crow, but it's like the simultaneous, like, horror of trying to exist as a human being in the real world and the occasional glory of existing as a human being in the real world, right? That's kind of where I'm at. And you, my friend?
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess that's a fair and accurate way to describe um where I am as well. It's funny because I've been talking to a lot of people, and that seems to be consistent across the board. Um, so yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, I don't like the last time we spoke, you or not the last time we spoke, but the last time we recorded was before you moved to Big Boy Farm. Or right,
Okay.
you had already moved there, but you were away for one thing or something like that, right? So, and then you didn't know what your internet situation was going to be, and you were traveling around doing your river ceremonies, right? And whatnot. And we had some back and forths about like the possibilities of meeting up in New Mexico, but then you sort of went dark, and I just I sensed that you needed to go dark, so I just left it alone and figured you would surface when you surfaced, and you would call when you were ready, and that's exactly what happened. So fill us in.
Wow. So, I mean, it has been, I mean, it has yet to stabilize since 2022, I suppose, when the Baltimore thing began. I keep waiting for the stability. I guess the stability is the fact that there is no stability. And so like finding the stability in the constant movement is where it's at for me, I suppose. So there's a lot which I could probably go into, but what's most topical for the time when we're recording is I just returned back from a 15-day adventure on the island of Hispaniola, on the Dominican Republic side of the island. And I mean, by no means was it a vacation, um, but that is what is probably front and center in my consciousness and my experience, and then also trying to um, trying to you know, integrate all that was experienced during that time.
Okay.
And let me give you like this. Can I quick, and I want to give you this frame up of like kind of how I'm thinking about it or understanding it within my own sort of context.
Yes.
One of the things which you and I have talked about a lot in our conversations is just like the idea of travel. And I have a complex relationship with travel. In fact, I probably just have complex relationships with everything. But in 2011, when I went down to Peru, um, and I did 2 weeks in the jungle at a retreat center there, um, that was a big experience in my life, and it was earmarked for me. I think in one part of the travel, because the lead up to that had a lot of like, that's what I think I was most anxious about in terms of going down there, was just like the small sort of things, was like the connecting flights, like how to in the Lima airport and so forth. And I did all of like the planning you could do beforehand. And I somehow got it wrong. And when I went down to Peru, and the connecting flight to go from Lima to Pucallpa, which is where it was, I ended up like being the person who is sprinting through the airport to catch a flight. Like I've flown countless times, and that was the only time I've ever been in that situation where I was running. And so in my mind, that was a manifestation of just kind of like the the adventure which was in front of me with the ayahuasca retreat. And that was 12 years ago. And my life has changed considerably in those 12 years. So fast forward to, just the current time, um, the trip to the Dominican Republic was trying in every way, and probably, personally, the best way I would experience all of the things that have always made me, that have provided anxiety as it relates to travel. And for me, it's always been about being stranded. Um, I was faced with these things like on such like a visceral level in Dominican Republic, and just having to work through that was kind of like what the trip was. And then when we were flying back, the day before we flew back, a hurricane went through the small hurricane went through the Caribbean. And I was happy that the island which we were flying from was not affected by it. But what I didn't realize was that the island which we were having a connecting flight was hit by it, and there was like all sorts of like travel chaos the day after. And there was like a period of time it looked like the flights were canceled, be stuck in the airport for 2 days, like all the hotels were like booked because for hurricane sort of stuff. And it turns out that that did not happen. Like the flight, which we thought was canceled, ended up like being rescheduled. And I found myself for the second time in my life, literally sprinting through the airport. And I just came through the TSA, and I'm running through the airport. I've got two people's bags. Like I've got like my carry bag, and I've got my other carry bag. And we had 5 minutes to make the gate. And I just came from TSA, so I didn't have a belt on my shorts. So I'm running through the airport with both hands in, like holding bags. And I need the belt, like not for fashion purposes, but to hold up my shorts. And my shorts are coming down. The shorts are falling down as I'm running. And the people are looking at the guy running through the airport. And I'm running all funny because I'm trying to hold it. So that was what the trip was. But it was the bookend. It was the bookend. Like the only other time that I found myself like running through the airport before was when I went to the jungle. And then the time which I ran through the airport again was when I was leaving. And so what feels to me, this was like a 12-year friggin' journey
I was
for
just
me.
gonna
And
ask.
this
I
was
was like, this was your ayahuasca trip.
yeah,
You really like this.
without a doubt. Like,
Yeah. Okay, quickly. This like I have a bunch of notes already on that which you've opened with, but I remember so like the first time I lived in Austin, right? The first time I was here for about a year and a half, and then I left for 6 months and came back, right? But on the last night that I was here, the first time, not the last night, but the last week I was here, like I went to a party, right? And I ate acid, and I had this moment where I wasn't sure that I wasn't just still at the same party that I went to the first time I went to a party when I got to Austin a year and a half ago, and that I had just been on a gigantic acid trip, right? And that the whole thing that I thought was my year and a half living in Austin had just been one night at a party on acid, and that I had tripped the whole thing, right? And that's kind of like what you're, in some ways, like what you're sort of describing here with that. So I understand that experience full well. Did you ever see the movie called Party Monster with Macaulay Culkin, and it's about the club kid named Michael Alec, who's
I'm familiar with it in concept. It
okay.
shows Macaulay Culkin in a bodysuit at some point, I believe.
Right. So Michael Alec was like a famous club kid in New York, and it's a true story. And he ended up supposedly killing someone and dumping their body in the river. Right. But there's a scene in the movie, and I've even heard this talked about in sort of the documentaries and stuff like that. Right. That this whole few years of activity that went on around the club kid scene and all this chaos that was, supposedly happening in the real world, felt to him like he was just tripping at the first night of the party that they started. Like he didn't, like at some point there's a statement he makes, I can't remember, I saw the movie so long ago, that he wasn't sure that everything that had happened over the last so many numbers of years wasn't just the trip he was on from the first night of the party, right? So I think that this is kind of you know how when you watch the cartoons they have like the bubble world where they're like when what's the cat that always chases the bird, Tweety, Sylvester and Tweety or whatever, right? When he's imagining how he's going to eat the bird, and he has this whole sort of thought bubble of like a reality of how things will turn out. It's almost like that. It's almost like there are substances that can send you into an alternate reality that is not as like temporally contained as we think it is. Like we think, okay, I took the drug, it wore off after 5 hours or 7 hours or 12 hours, so now I'm back in the real world. But are we? Like, or is that just part of the hallucination? And until we get like so many dimensions out, being able to observe that time, do we really even understand what has happened, right?
Yeah. I mean, it I don't have the sense, like I didn't have the sense like asking myself, what has this been? It never even occurred to me to ask myself, has this just been like, is this part of the ayahuasca dream? I mean, maybe I think about that all the time in life, but there was for many reasons a continuity between the experiences. And um most interestingly, like the the deconstructing of like what I just experienced, not so much like from an internal level of like what I felt or what my subjective experience was, but like where was I? Like why was I there? Like this part of the island, and what is this island? Because I went there for a very like the reason I was there was because Christy's daughter is half Dominican, and she's about to go off to middle school, and it was like a trip for her to go to. She's never been to the Dominican Republic. Like her father was American of Dominican Republic. He was an American Dominican Republic, but he's not from the island. And so Christy wanted to bring Naomi there for just kind of like a rite of passage sort of thing. And I was more or less along for not just along for the ride, but to be supportive, because I didn't have any interest to go there, to be quite honest. And to me, that set the stage more so that by look like all of the things that I've discovered afterwards makes it even more significant, because it wasn't something driven by me or a desire, but it was something that was driven by the circumstances of life. And then from everything that happened while there, and just kind of like how our minds work, like just kind of seeing the story, it is the it links up perfectly with the Susquehanna mystery, like Lock and Key, the island of Hispaniola. And looking at that, and I just made 2 videos, and there's a third video where I'm kind of like breaking that down. That coupled with the fact that there was like a lot of weird like CIA stuff, and like, these things that always seem to follow me around, like somehow that is interwoven also with this bookends of 2011 to 2024 for me. The going down to Peru, and this time going down to the Dominican Republic. Not exactly the same part of the world, but similar.
Okay, so just in this like little opening bit, there's like a bunch of things to touch on that I think like I want to touch on them, but probably not go like super deep into them, because I think they're just setting the stage for whatever we're going to talk about. But these are just the things that are already popping up, right? You and I haven't spoken to each other since like April or May or something like that. I was in the other apartment when last time we talked, right? I was in the old apartment. So, okay. So you referenced that like since Baltimore, you've been doing this sort of dance, right? And remember, one of the things that we talked about when you were in Baltimore was this old growth forest that was right where you were, right? And then
Right.
also that
Lincoln Park.
Leakin Park, Leakin Park, and that also that Baltimore was a city, a sister city with Odessa in the Ukraine, which was all that stuff with Ukraine was really firing up around then, right? So I don't know if you remember, but I think I played probably a year ago now a trailer for a movie called Parallel that Masaki showed me, and it was about
Okay.
someone staying in a cabin in an old growth forest and how it, like, all the different dimensions or timelines were kind of coalescing around it. Do you remember me showing you this?
Right. I remember that. Yeah. It was a
Okay.
black cast.
Right. Yes. Okay. I always keep having to forget and ask Masaki what the name of that is. And I just asked him again this week for some reason. So it's almost like I knew I was going to bring it up here. Okay. So remember at one point when we were researching the Violet Crown, which is the purple ring around Austin here, we found out that Austin's sister city was Athens and that there's also a Violet Crown there. Remember that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening to my friend Birdie talk to this guy, Nathan Sanders, and he was visiting Nathan Sanders where he lives in New York somewhere. And he lives in a town called Athens, actually. And he was talking about this weird property that he has his eye on that's in some kind of old growth forest. And he's sure it's some sort of like interdimensional compound, right? And so you talked about the only thing that's been stable for you the last few years is the instability, like understanding the motion of the instability, right? So I think that some of these places where we have been and where we spend time, like we're talking about the fact that these places are portals to other timelines or other dimensions, but then like when there's a weirdness that seems separate in our life that implies that we have wandered off into one of these alternate spaces, we never consider, we're always thinking that like we're playing this what if game, but we're probably not right. And we're never just like absolutely certain that we're right. And by spending time in these places, we have wandered off into some of these liminal spaces that have a different kind of connectivity or physics about the way things work, or a different way for like time to be arranged, and it would make sense that they would be like there would be these bookends of like, you know, Peru and the Dominican Republic, and that like sort of the center point of some of that is this area in Maryland that acts as like a junction between the various dimensions, and you seem to go back there whenever you're kind of trying to reorient yourself or whatever it is, right? So that was striking to me, what you said, like since Baltimore, right? Like I think where the experiences that I have been having over the last few months since we last spoke have been so confirmatory of almost every idea that we have thrown out there, that I'm like, the only thing that we're lacking is absolute belief in ourselves that like our intuition about things is correct, right? Like we still think, oh, that's an interesting idea. Let me investigate and see if it's so, instead of going with the idea that like, no, if my instincts say it's so, the greater likelihood is that it is. And then if it's not, then we can go and investigate and figure out what to do about the fact that it was not. And this is sort of the difference between us and the people who have figured out how to suck everyone else into their reality and sort of control that, is that they assume that they're right and we wonder if we are. Right? Next thing real quick. So you talked
Let me
about,
just say,
yeah.
let me respond to that. So that concept has been where I'm staying, on the compound where I'm staying, like that concept of fully embracing the idea that you are 100% certain of like all of that, like no self-doubt, and like what happens when you move forward throughout life without any self-doubt. Like we've been really like playing with that idea. So it what you just said lines up contextually with exactly what's going on like in this space where I am at this moment.
Okay. So then you went to Peru, you brought up Peru, right? And you were talking about like your anxieties about travel and the bookends, and you were going there to do like the ayahuasca retreat, right? Um, I had a conversation last Friday with Amin Hillman. Do you know who Amin Hillman is?
No.
He's this guy who's been like, he's been around actually for a long time, but a lot of people weren't aware of him, but he's just kind of catapulted into everyone's consciousness based on like a bigger podcast exposure he had. And he's a classical philologist. He translates ancient Greek, and he's basically, letting people know that everything that they believe about Christianity and the Bible and this, that, and the other thing is the opposite of what they've been told it
Oh,
is.
I know who this guy is. Yeah.
Okay. So I had a conversation with him last Friday that was super fascinating. I'm going to post it for supporters today and then probably the whole thing publicly on Monday. But we spent a lot of time talking about various drug experiences, right? And what he's saying, like he's saying that all of that's the real religion. That's the stuff that the cults were based on, because it was through these botanical and animal substances that we were able to communicate with the reality outside of the false time stream, the umbrella of time, right? And that when the drugs got removed, right, and he talks about sex being part of that as well, but when those things got removed, that's when we got further and further and further away from our ability to confidently believe our intuition about what we think is sort of really going on, right? It was a little different than the conversations he's had with other people, right? But so you talk about those ayahuasca experiences being really pivotal for you, right? And on some level, and in fact, so much so that it's part of like a bookends for you. And I think that probably, that was when you really, maybe you didn't have the research and the context for understanding the larger implications of that step outside of the normal dome of time or the regular spatial physics that we're sort of told is the real world. And it's not. It's like a small bubble inside of this otherwise, like this other reality that is the real world. And so that you've been thinking about that. Like this week, I've also come into, not that I didn't have it before, I had my own, but here's a person who studies something completely opposite than what I study, and literally is providing evidence for the claims that you and I have been making here, that I've been making with my stories, that you've been making with some of yours, and that it's like the original first text in the world say what we're saying, and everything in between has been some sort of distortion, right? Some sort of taking out the part that matters and then selling people on a story that like logically makes no sense, but because you don't have the context of the fact that we interact with the biology and the earth around us in order to gain information about the world, that's all been removed, right? So we have it's like we don't have the great decoder, right? There's all the stimulus around us, but we don't have the thing that helps us transduce or whatever, take a set of information and decode it into something that we can understand. That's all been removed, and that has kept us trapped in this like weird time bubble. And you're talking about pillars right here, like this thing. So okay, do you want to respond to that, and then I'll go to the next part?
No, keep going.
Okay. So then I was going to ask you how you ended up in the Dominican Republic, but you told me that as part of it. So I don't need to ask you that because you just told us that. And that said a new set when you said why, another set of ideas came, but I'm going to say this other thing first. So you talked about the concerns about a hurricane as you were leaving, right? So last year, Laura and I got into the same situation when we were going to Mexico. Like we understood that there was a huge tropical storm or hurricane or whatever it is that was coming to exactly where in Mexico we were going. And we had to decide if we wanted to go or not. And we figured out that like we can get there right before it starts. So we can get there without a problem and we can leave after. Like, should we cancel our trip or should we go? And we decided we were just going to go right into the storm, right? So we got there just a few hours before the storm came. And then pretty much everything was shut down for about a day or two. So we had to just kind of stay in the hotel, like in our room. It was a super interesting experience, though. I would say that I slept the best. I think I slept the most amount of hours straight that I have slept like in a long time while that was going on. Right? You couldn't even hear it. Like, it was quiet in our room. It was almost like we became the center of the storm, and it was totally still within our room. And we would look outside the window and be like, oh my God, I can't believe like we can't hear this or whatever it was. But it was this sort of calm in the center of the storm. And then once it passed, there was like a lot less people in town than there normally would be, which was more pleasant sort of for us. But it was that like going right into the storm kind of thing. There's this great attractor to that for me, right? Like, my dad used to call me Hurricane Emily when I was a kid, right? Like, I made everything around me sort of spin. But I think sometimes these trips into the eye of the storm, or even into this sort of like periphery of the storm, can provide a viewpoint or a context on how we experience reality that is different. And if we live places that don't have those kinds of weather events or whatnot, we wouldn't normally get, be exposed to that. Right. So I thought that was interesting. And then you went to the Dominican Republic, right? Which is a hub of baseball stars, which is something baseball has always been part of your narrative, right? A lot of the best baseball players come from Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, some of that area down there. They seem to have like a magic to the way they move, like a different relationship with time. And I'm sure that comes from sort of, being there. I didn't know Christy's daughter's name was Naomi, right? So, and I didn't know that her father was Dominican. So like that opened up a whole new portal. And of course it made me start thinking about MK Naomi, right? But also Naomi Osaka, Naomi Osaka, the tennis player. She's
Okay.
she's part Haitian. She's not Dominican, but she's Haitian. And Dominican Republic shares the island with Haiti, right? One of her parents is Haitian and the other is Japanese. And she's been sort of making a comeback this year. But I don't know why, like it just popped in, that we've talked about some of these namings of projects and programs as being coded in a way for us to sort of unlock an understanding later. Right. And it seems like you're unlocking some sort of understanding about your position in this sort of realm of coded temporal and spatial ideas and mechanics around Naomi here. Right. So Naomi Osaka is an interesting person. But then you said it was different. It locks up, right? It lines right up with the Susquehanna, even though it's totally different. Well, the Susquehanna is a river running through a land, and Dominican Republic is a land surrounded by water. So it's like a different aspect of the relationship with water and how that influences the way that we perceive our position in the temporal or dimensional space or stream. Does that make sense? And then you said, and it has all the CIA stuff around it. And to me, I think that's like what the whole Central Intelligence Agency is really sort of about, is tracking everybody's understanding of the domain, temporal or spatial, that they find themselves in. And you removed yourself from a land where you're looking at the water running through it and became a man on the land surrounded by water. Right. And so it kind of gave you some like same, different, right? Like flip side of the same sort of
Right.
narrative. So those are my comments on the opening bit. What do you think?
Let me hop into there, because that's a good transition, or a good place for me to pick it up. So when I was talking about the relationship, it was more so of between the Susquehanna mystery and Hispaniola. Like, I'm talking more so on the level of mystery as opposed to the physical
I get it.
expression.
I understand. Yeah.
So let me finish this. So let me run with this. So what I meant with that is the Susquehanna mystery begins with the idea that at the mouth of the Susquehanna Bay is the very first colony of the British Empire. on the island of Hispaniola, because that's the name of the island where Haiti and Dominican Republic are. That is the place of the very first colony of the age of navigation. So when Columbus came, his first place he landed was Hispaniola, and he set up a colony. And so the whole idea is like with this colony system, like, I mean, what we don't know if that actually happened or not, but what we do know for certain is this is the history. And in the age of navigation, it was originated and led by like Spanish and Portugal. That's the mainstream history story. And after Columbus established La Navidad in the Haiti side of Hispaniola in 1492, there are a whole bunch of other like countries that were like vying to be like take over the New World. And then the eventual victor, if you will, that was the British Empire. So it begins with this link. Like the first colony of the age of navigation. And then as that unfolded, that story, then the first colony of the British Empire, who was the victor of the age of navigation. Like that's where the continuity began.
Got it. Okay.
So the place where we stayed in Dominican Republic, it was this, I'm going to go into here right now. Share screen. So the place which we stayed was it's a town called Barahona, okay? And we stayed in Barahona because Barahona is like right around here. We flew into here and we drove 5 hours to go to Barahona. And Barahona is the reason why we were there is because Barahona is the home to the only mine in the entire world where a certain gemstone is found. And that gemstone is called Larimar. This is Larimar.
Yep.
Okay, Larimar is only found in one place.
Yep.
Are you familiar with Larimar?
Yeah, Laura.
Okay, so it's found in one place in the world. Okay, and it's found in Barahona. It's the world's only place where you can find it. So we decided to stay there. That's why we wanted to go, because like Laura, Christy's got a lot of Larimar, and that was like important for her. So we go there on a shoestring budget. And well, look, actually, before I get into that, so it turns out I had no idea that this is part of the lore of Larimar. Is Edgar Cayce had a prediction that sometime after the time of his life, that a blue stone would be found in the Caribbean Sea, and this is a stone which connects directly back to Atlantis. Like you take for whatever you think about Edgar Cayce, that was said. And then Larimar Mine, it was discovered in the 1970s. And so all of the Edgar Cayce followers were like, this is it. This is the Edgar Cayce stone. And one of the reasons why that's so interesting is this is where Edgar Cayce's headquarters is, the Association of Research and Enlightenment. And it's found right here on Virginia Beach. Edgar Cayce's headquartered right here in Virginia Beach. And where that is the in Virginia Beach, this location right here, this is the opening of the Chesapeake Bay. This is the opening of the Susquehanna River. So literally, this guy who's on the Susquehanna River makes the claim that that right here, he says, like, there's going to be the finding of a stone sometime in the future, and the stone is found right here. And this is the exact location where the very first colony, where Jamestown takes place. Now we've got a second link, which is going on right here.
Yeah.
So we find ourselves, we go to Barahona, and we're there on more or less a shoestring budget. And the place which we booked was, this was it. Looks great. Here's the Airbnb, right? Like, doesn't it look like immensely charming right here? It's literally right on the water. It's right here. And this is where the mine is. It's like 2 miles from the mine. The mine's up in the mountains. And we get there. And as soon as we arrive, this is the street it's on. This is the house, and this is the house right here. It was like, you know, there's a bit of a cultural shock. Like I've been to a lot of places in the world, but this was the third world. Like this did not, like everything about it, the amount of trash everywhere and the amount of like it was not like a place where you wanted to stay, despite the fact this Airbnb listing makes it look really beautiful. But when we got there, it was it just wasn't a place. I didn't feel comfortable with young Naomi and Christy there. In fact, the moment when we first arrived, we walked out to the beach behind the house. We walked out right here. It seemed to be the hangout location for all of the young men in the area. And the moment we walk onto the beach, like this guy comes running up with a machete on his hip, and he pours a whole bunch of Larimar in our hands. And speaking like Spanish very quickly, we couldn't follow him. And then he starts demanding money for it with just like this machete on his hip. Like that was our first introduction. Turns out like everything was fine. We stayed there for a handful of days, but like on first appearances, like it was like, this looks really friggin' dangerous, but it turned out to be fine. But anyway, we were like,
Can I
we
ask you a
can't
question
stay.
real fast? Can I ask you a question real fast
Yes,
before we move to the next place? What is angel cell?
no idea. No
Okay,
idea.
just that, like, I'm looking at the names of the places around you, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, right? So you have Restaurant Loose, which Loose is light. So you have light and an angel here, an angel cell, which is kind of fascinating. And then over here you have Ayala's surfing spot, right? And our homunculus friend Juan Ayala, right, who also is from that area of the world, right? He's from Puerto Rico. So I'm just looking at that. Everywhere you go, there everything is, right? Isness of it. But okay, continue.
So we go and we're right there, and we're like, this isn't really going to work out, and we're scrambling while we are on vacation. We ended up going to another place, and that place was even worse. Like it then went to another place. Like we have to find places that are available right away, and it was just like it was this. It seemed like a movie, but we eventually found this listing. We found this listing right here, and it is a farm stay in Barahona at $60 a night, a little bit more money than we wanted to pay, but we're like, all right. And it was up in the mountains. And really the problem with a lot of these places is they were so friggin' loud. They were so loud. And so this was like a dream come true. We're like, okay, this is where we're going to go. We're going to go and stay to this place. And Christy tries to go and book it, and nothing, there's no response. I'm like, well, let me go and try and book it from my account. And I was accepted right away. And so for whatever reason, like I was the key to getting accepted to this place, which was a coffee farm. That was the type of farm it was, and it was up in the mountains in Barahona. So so this here is the Airbnb like conversation.
Was that a butterfly on the leaf in the picture before? Go back for a second. There was a leaf. Yes, that's a butterfly on a leaf. Excellent. Continue.
This one or this one? The top one or the bottom?
Bottom one. So we have a lizard and a butterfly. Okay, continue.
Lizard and a butterfly. So, all right. So like we were planning on staying here. In fact, we went to like 3 other places, and we found this place like in the middle of like, this is day, I think 4 or 5 by the time we finally get into this place. Let me see. I think I've got, and this is where it's located. It's located right here. This is where we were staying, and this is the Larimar mine. So now like we go to this place, and it is, it's less than a mile, at least by distance, from the mine. Keep in mind, this is sea level, and here we're going up the mountain.
Okay.
And there's a road, like a paved road that goes around the perimeter and through the cities. But to go up in where we were going, this is the main road. If you could follow this like white line.
Yeah.
You see it?
Yep.
So that's just a dirt road. It's a dirt road, and it's maintained by a different mining company, like some anonymous multinational mining company that has operations down here. And it is a road. It's not a flat dirt road. It's like going straight up a hill. Like it's very difficult to get up there. And then right around here, so this was 5 miles up this road, and then we turned right here on this dirt road and got even steeper and steeper to get right here. And the guy, he told me, he's like, listen, when you're gonna drive up here, he's like, first off, like you can do it, but like it's a really, really treacherous drive up in a car, and you're gonna pass by all of these Haitian shanty towns. He's like, just pay no mind the Haitian shanty towns that are up in the middle of the mountains. So like, all right, this is where we're going. We could see right here, this is a little bit more of a closer image of the dirt road. This right here is where we're staying. And you can see this is like the shanty town. Like this is a dirt road, and these are all of the shanty towns that are right there. So going back to this, here's the conversation. The guy says, hey, his name is Ron Savage, right? And this is all stuff which is Airbnb. So right. I'm comfortable sharing this. This isn't private per se. Please call me to discuss your booking. You'll probably need to have a high clearance vehicle to drive there. And he's saying that he's in Albuquerque. That's where he is right now. Yeah. And so, all right. So you go and you look a little bit deeper on here. This is his profile. And it says, I've worked and traveled all over the world, and I live in the Southwest right now. And this is what his work is.
Yep.
Can you read that?
Yep.
U.S. Foreign Service Officer.
Yep.
French, so Portuguese, what is U.S.?
Yes.
What?
French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Yes, I was looking at languages.
All right. So I did a little research on Ron Savage. So this guy was the deputy office chief with USAID's office in Haiti. Mm-hmm. And he also did time in Sudan. Here's a picture of him right here. And this kind of looks like the UN. It's not the main UN General Assembly, but here's a picture of him.
Yep. The guy on the right, yes.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what USAID is an independent agency of the United States government, primarily responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance, a budget over $50 billion. Formed in 1961. So when there's an international humanitarian crisis, the U.S. government sends the USAID, right? So we've got this. This from Democracy Now! Is USAID the new CIA? Right here, secret programs hurt foreign aid efforts. The type of clandestine operations aimed at regime change that USAID has been running under the guise of democracy in Cuba. Right here, this is a more recent article. This is media outlets blocked by Iran-backed groups have justified the killing of a targeted civilian who they said was a spy. They say this guy was working for USAID. Right here, this is just Wikipedia. USAID has maintained a close working relationship with the CIA and has operated with the cover of USAID. Like, it is just a well-documented fact that USAID and the CIA have some type of relationship. And here we are in the farmhouse of the guy who is the deputy office chief of USAID's Haiti desk. And as we know, like Haiti and the CIA have a very long history with each other. So I find myself like absolutely like not by any plans, like, of my own, a mile away from this mystical mind predicted by Edgar Cayce in a farm run by someone who at least has like 1 degree of separation, if not the same organization of the intelligence agency we're always talking about. And and he's surrounded by a Haitian shantytown. This is the USAID's Haitian chief. and the shanty town is 100 miles away from Haiti, from the Haiti border. Like, how did they get there up on top of this mountain, which the only way up there is if you got a ride from the international anonymous mining company. So that is where part of like where I was finding myself in the midst of all of this, where the adventure took place for me.
Yeah, it is interesting the way with Airbnb, like it certainly like from both sides of the I've had people tell me that they're sure that they're being trafficked by Airbnb, right? That they're being like guided towards houses where they will experience targeted individual stuff, or be surveilled or monitored or whatever. But I've also had the experience myself of finding this seemingly perfectly ideal scenario arise out of nowhere, and the owner of the home seems to have it. In fact, I think I even ended up one time like in an Airbnb where like the person was joking that it was a CIA safe house. I found like in one of the comments like afterwards that I was looking at, I'm like, that place was cool, but it was kind of weird, right? And then I looked in the comments and other people were like, I think this is a CIA safe house, and da 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 da. So it is interesting the way, just like YouTube, just like Facebook, just like we don't think of Airbnb as being a social media platform, but it is, right? And it's
But
constant.
I would say it's the most real
Yeah,
social media platform, because it involves your actual like moving about.
yeah, correct, right? But people don't think of it that way, even though it has all of you can chat back and forth with someone on it, you post a profile, you can have videos on there and whatnot. But it certainly seems to operate in this way of aligning people with whatever the next experience that the simulation wants to feed it is going to be, right? And the fact, so
It's
yeah,
the
go ahead.
Go on, finish.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to take us off away from where you were going. So go ahead.
So the experience there was like it was the most calm we had during the 15 days. We were there for 3 nights. And the guy who I was just talking about, who may or may not exist, right? I never had any human contact with him. The farm was run by like a couple that was in their 70s or 80s. And we had an absolutely delightful time with them, and they cooked for us. And it was a great part of the trip. But that being said, like it ties in with like, living 1 mile away from Dale Graff's house, like, all of these sort of things like just keep on popping up in this game, which seems to be rendering from the perspective of my eyes and physical body's experience. Like it feels much more like simulation game than it does feel like anything else. Like I don't have much of a charge, positive or negative, around Edgar Cayce. But the very fact is, like, he talked about this, and Larimar is like, for the Edgar Cayce folks, like that's a big deal. And like here's the Larimar. I've got some pieces of the Larimar of what the machete guy was dropping in our hands. Like we're like right by there, this history. It's just, and that history tied in so tightly with all of the other research. Like it's almost like it's almost silly. Like it's almost becoming like a parody of itself. It's so
Yeah.
tightly woven.
Yes, 100%, right? Like it seems impossible that if there are really 8 billion people in the world all living their own story, that like all of these synchronicities and coincidences keep happening around me or you or whatever it is, right? That type, right, like it doesn't seem to matter which choice we make, whatever choice we make seems to be like the end of the trail that we or you know, the next step on the logical trail, even though it seems like way out of left field. It's almost like the simulation is able to really quickly reroute itself, re-render itself, and provide like the perfect mitt to catch the pitch that we threw somewhere long ago with a completely different story in mind.
It's like, I don't think I've seen the last couple Super Bowls, but I'm pretty certain, like, I believe every Super Bowl has ended in like the most spectacular, like play, like nail biting sort of thing. Like, so if you're a football enthusiast and you imagine like the most exciting, like fairy tale Super Bowl ending, like that's just happening like time and time again. And it's not just the Super Bowl where that's happening. It's happening everywhere. As like just to what like, and I want to juxtapose that to what you said with how we began our conversation today. You're like, well, you know, I'm hanging in there. It's a long and windy road, or whatever it was. Like there's both like this immense realization of like, yeah, it's rendering exactly to the stories that are in your mind. But it comes with a friggin' toll. Like it's like you're after you play the Super Bowl, you've got all your bruises and you're banged up and you got to go and ice your wounds.
All right, so here's my question to you. In your like wildest fantasy, the one where you're like, this is what I'm really thinking, but I'm not going to say this one actually to anybody, because if I say this one, right, this is really going to be the one where people think
So why am I going to say it to you?
Because that's what we do here, right? Because
Okay, all right.
this
So
is
ask
the
me the
inner
question.
sanctum. This is the inner sanctum of the asylum. In your
Right.
wildest fucking fantasy, what's going on here with this trip? What was what was going on?
All right. Let me go back and say this. So, we're like, I was aware once we went to the place in the farm in Haiti. Like I saw right away in the guy's biography that it said he was a US agent, US Foreign Service agent. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is it. This is it again. But I'm doing it with like tongue in cheek. Like it's always kind of like Scooby-Doo-esque fun. And when we get on the property, they have 3 dogs that are on the property, and the property is surrounded by like a fence, and the fence is like locked in, or you know, to stop people to come in. But you know, supposedly it was totally safe there. But in the property, the property, the people who stayed on the property, that older couple, they lived there, and they were the sweetest, kindest people you could imagine. And 2 of the dogs were locked up. One of the dogs was a Rottweiler who was just sweet as can be. And it was really funny because the last Rottweilers were the ones which like kind of attacked me in the beginning of this year. And I'm like, okay, this is my next Rottweiler experience. And this was like this overweight. I've never seen an overweight Rottweiler before. It was like the sweetest thing and would sleep under our bed. But these other 2 dogs were locked up, and it was all made of cinder blocks. It was, imagine like a cube, 12 feet by 12 feet by 12 feet. And there was a fence around that. And there was a door with a chain link fence over the door, and it was padlocked. And there was like a small area where the dogs could go in and out. But for the most part, they were like locked up in this cell. And I'm like, this is exactly where you're going to go and keep, you know, this is your CIA like torture chamber, and you got someone like locked up in there. I'm like, it just fits perfectly. And this was funny too. This was so friggin' funny. So I'm looking at the guy lives there like maybe for a month or 2 out of the year. The rest of the time he is in New Mexico. So it's his house. And I was looking at his bookshelves, and for the most part, it was all like globalist type of stuff, like
Climate change
books written by,
bullshit.
I'm sorry?
Climate change bullshit and stuff like that.
Totally,
Yeah.
completely. All written like World Bank, like written by the people who are like World Bank economists and so forth. And there was one book there, and there was a book called, I think it was called The Human Factor. And The Human Factor was a novel by Graham Greene. Do you know who Graham Greene is?
No, but this is perfect. I'm looking it up right now. Go ahead.
Okay, I didn't know who Graham Greene was, but like I'm researching it while I'm
Well,
there.
there's a
Graham
documentary
Greene
too.
was
There's a documentary.
he was a novelist and he wrote like a lot of spy novels.
Uh-huh.
So there's like a spy novel that's there. And in the inside cover of The Human Factor says like written Ron Savage purchased 1969 to 1970, and then it had like an email address tied to like Yahoo. What was implied by like that date written on the inside of the book is when that book was purchased. So I go and I look at the book. The book was written 4 years after or 8 years after the dates that were provided on there. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
So the point where the reason why I'm bringing those up is because you asked me a question. You're like, well, what in my wildest fantasy imagination do I think is going on? So for whatever reason, it's the conclusion I've reached is like, that our experiential reality is highly, highly, highly dictated by the beliefs and stories we have in our head. And whether that's because it's a simulation or that's just how the realm works or like or whatever, like that seems to be true. And I know that I wouldn't quite say like almost like little boy like me as a 10-year-old would have a fantasy of me as an adult as a spy. And like as an adult I kind of play that part sometimes like what it would be like to be a spy. And what seemingly makes sense is like, this is what it looks like. And if you really get down to, I think I said this earlier in the conversation, like, I come with some degree of travel anxiety. And it's never like travel anxiety of like planes crashing or dying. My travel anxiety comes from this, of being stranded, of being stranded. Like being stranded really isn't that big of a deal because like if someone was actually stranded, like chances are they're going to get picked up, like somehow. But for whatever reason, like that is immensely like on a visceral, unlogical, deep, like irrational, emotional level in my body, in my cells is like I've got like a fear of traveling and being stranded. And I'm like, oh, it's because I'm a spy. It's been left like behind, like behind somewhere. And I'm like, is this just a story that I like here? So here are the two things. It's like I'm either so deep cover that I have no idea that what I'm doing, like the MK Ultra stories, or this is all just a silly game and it's like like the movie Vanilla Sky or the movie Total Recall, where this is just like a game which I'm playing. And I asked to be like, okay, let me be a character and play a spy, and this is how it's playing itself. Like that's like my fantasy explanation. I hold that loosely, but I have no reason to believe that it's not an actual description or potentiality of what's going on here.
All right. You want to hear what I think?
You tell me what you think.
Let's go potty and do that on the other side before we leave the
All right.
public airwaves. Let people know what you got cooking right now and where they can find you.
All right. So I just went into like great detail. I'm doing a 3-part, actually it's gonna be a 4-part documentation of what I just kind of highlighted with you here today. The first part is has to do with like the connection to Hispaniola and how Hades is actually indicating why this is the underworld. Second part goes into baseball. It's more than just like random that baseball happens to flourish in such a way. And I show statistically how the finest concentration of baseball players anywhere in the world happen on Hispaniola. And then the third part, I'm going to go into Larimar. And then the fourth part is where I go and I tell the personal story of like how this is my like how this ties into more like an ayahuasca growth experience. So all of that's on the YouTube channel if you're interested in that. Susquehanna Alchemy YouTube. But for the most part, if you are interested in like a starboard session, that's how I work one-on-one with people, where I do the natural astrology. I don't have a website anymore. I used to do Linktree. They took Linktree away from me. So the only way you can order this and you could do this is you got to contact me via email, the old-fashioned way. So reach out and we could talk about that, what a starboard session looks like and why that's a beneficial thing for helping you get out of the paradigm. And you too could be a spy living in the CIA farms in the Dominican Republic.
Those are the kind of adventures people are going to be into, like, going forward here. So, okay, perfect. I'll put your email address in the description box when this goes out. All right, we're gonna go. I'm gonna go potty, and then we're gonna move over to the other side. Patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. It's also on the Project Kids Locals page, so projectkids.locals.com. Okay, we will see you on the other side. Be right back.